Most people see a man in his late 60s standing in line outside a music venue, and they see exactly what he looks like. They see someone's grandfather. They see a man who took a wrong turn. They see out of place. On a Saturday night in Columbus, Ohio, a bouncer named Marcus Webb looked at a gray-bearded biker at the back of the line outside the anchor room and saw something even simpler than that. He saw a punchline. He saw a man he could perform for the crowd at the door, which was 22 people deep and cold and impatient and in need of something to laugh at. He looked at the man's license, and he looked at the date, and he looked at the crowd, and he said, loud enough for the whole line to hear, "Born in 1957? Sir, you sure you're at the right place?" The crowd laughed. Marcus Webb smiled. He was good at this. He had been working this door for 4 years, and he had a gift for it, for reading who would take it and who would fight back. And this man, this gray-bearded man with the liver spots on the backs of his hands and the slight forward lean that long miles put in a man's spine, was going to take it. That was the reed. Marcus Webb had never once been wrong about the reed. He was wrong tonight. He handed the license back, still smiling, and the man turned his wrist over to get it, and Marcus Webb saw what was on the inside of that wrist. And the smile stayed on his face for exactly 1 more second before it left and did not come back. The anchor room sat on the corner of 4th and Vine in Columbus, Ohio, in a building that had been a machine shop, then a recording studio, then dark for 11 years before a couple in their 30s had gutted it and opened it as a live music venue in 2019. It held 312 people at capacity, standing room on the floor, and a balcony that ran the 3 walls above it. And it had the particular acoustic quality of a room built for something else first. A roughness at the edges, a warmth in the middle that newer purpose-built venues spent a lot of money trying to fake. The stage was at the north end. The bar ran the length of the west wall. The room smelled of old brick and spilled beer and the specific electrical smell of stage equipment warming up, and on Saturday nights it filled by 8:30, and the sound carried 2 blocks down 4th Street, and the neighbors had long since stopped complaining because the music was that good. Tonight was a 3-act bill. The headliner was a blues guitarist out of Cleveland who pulled 300 people on a cold Saturday without trying. The opening acts were local, a folk duo at 8, and then at 8:45, a 26-year-old named Danny Rourke playing original material with a borrowed backing band, his second time on this stage and his first time with his name above the door. His father's name was Walt Rourke. Walt was 67 years old, and he had driven up from Chillicothe that afternoon on a 2009 Harley-Davidson Road King that he had owned for 19 years and that he knew the sound of the way he knew his own heartbeat. He had a gray beard that reached his collar and hands that carried the grain of a man who had spent 31 years working pipe at a natural gas facility and had retired 2 years ago with a handshake and a card and a pension that covered what it needed to cover. He was 6 feet tall and had been broader once and had gone lean in the way older men go lean, not diminished, redistributed. The weight of him settling into something more essential. The patch on the inside of his left wrist was 29 years old and had been done by a man in Dayton who was himself dead now, and it was the blue-black of old ink gone deep. The death's head clear, the name of the chapter in a half circle below it, and you had to know what you were looking at to know what you were looking at. He had parked 3 blocks south and walked because the night was cold and he needed the air, and because every time he arrived somewhere on foot, instead of on the bike, he gave himself time to change his mind. And tonight, he was not going to change his mind. He had not spoken to Danny in 3 years. 2 months ago, Danny had called, a Tuesday, 9 a.m., the way his son always called, never evenings, always mornings, always when he knew Walt would be awake and sober and alone. He had not said much. He had said he was playing the Anchor Room on the 14th if Walt wanted to come. That was all. Walt had said he would try. Danny had said okay. They had hung up. Walt had sat at his kitchen table in Chillicothe for 40 minutes and then he had called back and said he would be there. Not that he would try, that he would be there. And Danny had said okay again, and that was the last they had spoken. He had not told Danny what time he was arriving or where he had parked. He had not told anyone he was going. He was carrying the weight of 3 years of absence the way you carry something you know you cannot put down until you are in the right place to put it down. And the right place was inside that room, watching his son play guitar. He got in the back of the line and he put his hands in his jacket pockets and he waited. Before we get to what happens when Walt Work finally makes it through that door, hit subscribe and drop your city in the comments. I want to know where this story finds you tonight, because what's already happening inside the Anchor Room and what Walt is about to do when he sees it is the reason none of us are going anywhere until this is finished. Back to the line, back to Marcus Webb, and back to a little girl named Rosie who had no idea what was about to happen. Her name was Rosie Callahan. She was 7 years old, and she was sitting on the floor in the northwest corner of the Anchor Room with her back against the wall and her knees pulled up to her chest and a piece of paper in her hands that she had been folding and refolding for 40 minutes. She was wearing a coat that was too warm for inside and sneakers that lit up at the heel when she walked, and her hair was in 2 braids that had started the evening neat and were now coming undone on the left side. She had brown eyes that were very large in a small face and the particular expression of a child who is trying very hard to look like she is fine. She was not fine. She had been not fine for 1 hour and 22 minutes. Rosie Callahan's grandmother, a woman named Eleanor Callahan, who was 69 years old and who had been taking her granddaughter to live music since Rosie was 4, because Eleanor believed that live music was one of the things a childhood required, had been at the bar ordering a soda for Rosie and a club soda for herself when she had felt the thing in her chest that she had been told to watch. 4, and had sat down on a bar stool and told the bartender, whose name was Chris, that she needed a moment, just a moment. And Chris had called 911 and the paramedics had come in 7 minutes, and Eleanor had told Rosie from the stretcher, very calmly, that she was going to be fine and that Chris was going to stay with Rosie until her mother came, and that Rosie should not be scared. Rosie was scared. Her mother was coming from Westerville, 40 minutes away, and had been called at 7:23, and it was now 8:41, and the crowd had filled in around the corner where Rosie sat, and the noise had built, and the lights had gone down, and the folk duo had played their set, and now the room was between acts, and people were moving, and nobody, not one of the 311 people standing in the Anchor Room on a Saturday night in Columbus had looked into the northwest corner and seen a 7-year-old sitting alone on the floor in a coat that was too warm, refolding a piece of paper with hands that would not be still. Nobody except Chris, who checked on her every 4 minutes and who had been doing this job for 6 years and knew better than to leave the bar unmanned on a Saturday night between acts and was doing the best he could, which was not enough, and he knew it. The piece of paper Rosie was folding was a drawing she had made that afternoon, a horse, because she was in a horse phase, because she had been in a horse phase for the last 8 months, because her grandmother had taken her to a farm in August and she had not recovered from the horses. She carried the drawing everywhere. The horse had 6 legs because she had run out of room on the paper. She had not noticed this yet. She would not notice it for another 2 years, and when she did, she would find it funny, and her grandmother would be there when she laughed. She did not know, in this corner whether her grandmother was fine. She had said she was fine. Adults said that. Rosie had learned at 7 that adults said that when things were not fine, to keep you from being scared, and she was scared anyway, which made her wonder what the point of saying it was. She folded the horse drawing into a square and unfolded it and folded it again. Nobody looked at the northwest corner. The lights dimmed for the second act. Walt Rourke had gotten through the door. After Marcus Webb had seen the wrist and the smile had left his face, he had handed Walt's license back without another word and unclipped the rope, and Walt had walked through without acknowledgement of any of it. Because acknowledgement was not required, and Walt Rourke had never in his life needed a bouncer to know who he was. He had needed to get inside. He was inside. He stood at the back of the floor and let his eyes adjust and scanned the room the way he scanned every room, methodically left to right twice. He found the stage. He found the bar. He found the exit signs. He found the northwest corner. He did not immediately understand what he was seeing. A small shape on the floor. A coat. A child sitting alone, in the specific posture of a child who is holding very still because moving would make the fear more real. He looked at the bar. The bartender, Chris, was 3 deep with orders and glancing at the corner every 30 seconds with the expression of a man who is aware a situation is wrong and has run out of options for making it right. Walt looked at the stage. The second act was being introduced. He could see a young man in a flannel shirt adjusting a guitar strap, head down, not looking at the crowd yet, doing the thing musicians do in the last moment before they become visible. That was Danny. Walt knew the way his son held his shoulders when he was about to go on stage, the particular set of them braced and loose at once. The habit of a boy who had played guitar in his bedroom for 7 years before anyone outside the family had heard him. He looked at the northwest corner again. The child had not moved. Walt crossed the floor. He did not push through the crowd. He moved through it the way large men move through crowds when they know where they are going and have decided to go there. The crowd parted the way crowds part, without being asked. He reached the northwest corner and he crouched down, which took something from his knees that it always took now, and he looked at the little girl at eye level. She looked back at him. She did not move. "Hey," he said. She said nothing. "You waiting for somebody?" She looked at him for a moment. Her hands tightened on the folded paper. "My grandma," she said. "She had to go, in an ambulance." Walt did not say anything for a moment. "Okay," he said. "Is somebody coming for you?" "My mom." She looked at the floor. "She's 40 minutes away." "She was 40 minutes away a long time ago. What's your name?" "Rosie, Rosie." He looked at the paper in her hands. "What have you got there?" She looked down at it. "A horse." "Can I see?" She hesitated. Then she held it out. He took it carefully with both hands and unfolded it and looked at it in the low light. "6 legs," he said. "I ran out of room." "Makes him faster," Walt said. 6 legs, he's going to win every race." She looked at the drawing. Something shifted very slightly in her face. "You think so?" she said. 6-legged horse? Nobody's catching that horse." She looked at him for another moment. Then she said, very quietly, "I don't want to be by myself." Walt folded the drawing back the way she had had it and handed it back to her. "You're not," he said. "I'm going to stay right here until your mom gets here." He settled back against the wall beside her, which his knees registered as a complaint he chose not to honor. "Okay?" She looked at the stage, where the second act had started, a clean guitar line opening into the room, clear and unhurried, finding its way up to the balcony and back. "Is that good?" Walt said. "Yeah," she said. She listened for a moment. "He's really good." "He is," Walt said. and something in the way he said it made her look at him. "Do you know him?" she said. Walt was quiet for a moment. On the stage, Danny Rourke was playing the first song of his set, eyes closed. The guitar doing what it had been doing since Danny was 9 years old, and Walt had brought home a second-hand Stratocaster from a pawn shop in Chillicothe and set it against Danny's bedroom wall without comment and let the boy find it. "Yeah," Walt said. "I know him." On the other side of the anchor room, Marcus Webb had come in off the door and found the floor manager, a man named Pete Ostrowski, and told him what he'd seen in the corner, a child, alone, northwest wall, and Pete had immediately gone to Chris at the bar. 3 minutes of conversation. Pete had gotten on his radio. 2 staff members had started moving toward the corner and had found the corner already occupied. A large gray bearded man in a riding jacket sitting against the wall with a small girl beside him, both of them watching the stage. Pete had stood back and watched for a moment and then nodded at his staff and said "leave it" and gone back to the floor. Marcus Webb stood at the back of the room with his arms folded and looked at the corner and did not say anything. The set ran 40 minutes. Rosie Callahan sat against the wall and listened to the guitar and refolded her horse drawing once more and did not refold it again. Walt Rourke sat beside her and watched his son play on a stage in Columbus, Ohio, on a Saturday night, for the first time. And he did not look away from the stage for the full 40 minutes, and he did not say anything, and his face did not do anything theatrical or large, and if Rosie had been older, she might have understood what she was looking at, which was a man receiving something he had driven 3 hours to receive and had not been certain he would get, which was the proof that his son was all right, that the thing Danny had always had in him had survived the 3 years of silence intact, that the music was still there, that the boy was still there, that it was not too late. He already knew it wasn't too late. He had known it on the drive up. But knowing and seeing are different currencies, and he had needed to see. At 9:31, a woman came through the side door with the specific momentum of a mother who has been driving fast for 37 minutes. She was in her mid-30s, coat half-buttoned, scanning the room with the white face of someone who has been holding themselves together on the highway and is about to stop holding. She found the northwest corner. She crossed the floor and she was on her knees before Rosie had fully registered she was there, and Rosie said "Mom" with a sound in it that she had been keeping in for 1 hour and 49 minutes, and the woman pulled her daughter in and held on. Walt got to his feet, slowly, and stepped back to give them the space that was theirs. The mother looked up at him from the floor, her daughter in her arms. "Were you with her?" she said. Yes. She looked at him. She looked at Rosie. She looked back at him. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was not steady. "Thank you." Walt nodded. On the stage, Danny Rourke was finishing his last song. The room had given him something, not the headliner's 300, but a good crowd, attentive. The kind that goes quiet between songs rather than filling the gap with noise. He was playing the ending out, letting it breathe, his head down over the guitar. Walt watched until the last note. Then he walked to the bar and found Chris. "The little girl in the corner," he said. "Her mom's here." Chris closed his eyes briefly. "Thank God." "I couldn't leave the bar." "I know," Walt said. "She's fine." He ordered a water. He stood at the bar and drank it and waited. The stage lights came up between acts. The floor filled with movement, people heading to the bar, to the bathrooms, to each other. From the far side of the stage, the second act was breaking down their equipment, the borrowed backing band pulling cables and collapsing stands, and Danny Rourke was talking to someone near the stage steps, his back to the room. Walt set his glass down. He started across the floor. He had almost reached the stage steps when someone stepped in front of him. A venue staff member, young, uncertain, doing his job. "Sir, I'm sorry, This area is staff only, I know, Walt said. Tell Danny Rourke his dad is here. The staff member looked at him, looked at the patch on the jacket, looked back. 1 second, he said. He went. Walt stood at the foot of the stage steps and waited and did not fidget and did not look around the room. He looked at the stage, which was being reset, and he waited. He heard footsteps on the wooden stairs before he saw him. Danny Rourke came down the stage steps with the guitar still in his hand, and he stopped on the second step from the bottom and looked at his father from that small height. And neither of them said anything for a moment. Danny was built like his mother, lean where Walt was broad, angular where Walt was thick, and he had Walt's eyes, the particular gray of them, and he had a scar on his chin from a bicycle when he was 10, and Walt had carried him 4 blocks to the urgent care because the car was in the shop, and Walt could see the scar from here. You came, Danny said. I said I would, Walt said. Danny looked at him. His hand tightened on the neck of the guitar. You were good, Walt said. That third song. That was, Dad, let me finish. Walt looked at the stage, then back at his son. That was the best thing I've heard in a long time. I mean that. Danny was quiet. Something moved across his face that was not quite the thing he had been protecting himself from Walt seeing for 3 years. And then it was exactly that thing. And he stopped protecting it. Okay, he said. I've got some things to say, Walt said. And I know you've heard that before. And I know that doesn't mean much right now. But I drove up today because I wanted to hear you play. And I wanted to tell you that in person. And I'm going to say the other things too when you're ready. Not tonight, if you're not ready. Whenever you're ready. Danny stood on the second step and looked at his father. I'm playing again in 3 weeks, he said. Smaller venue. You could, he stopped. Tell me where, Walt said. I'll be there. They stood there for a moment in the noise of the room, the crowd moving around them, the bartenders shouting orders, the headliner's crew doing sound check on the stage above them, and the 3 years between them doing what 3 years do when 2 people finally stop moving away from each other, not disappearing, not suddenly resolved, but becoming something that had a shape and could therefore be dealt with. There's a diner on 5th, Danny said. If you want. Yeah, Walt said. I want. Outside, it was cold. The line for the headliner had reformed and stretched half a block, and Marcus Webb was back at the door doing his job, and he was doing it differently than he had been doing it at 7:45, which was to say, he was doing it without the performance, without the running commentary, without the read that told him who would take it and who would fight back. He was just checking IDs. He was doing the job and nothing more, and nobody who came through the door that night had a story to tell about it afterward, which is the most a bouncer can hope for if he is being honest about what the job actually is. A week later, Rosie Callahan's grandmother came home from the hospital with a stent and a modified prescription and instructions to take it easier than she had been taking it, which Eleanor Callahan received and agreed to and did not particularly intend to follow, because Eleanor Callahan had been taking Rosie Callahan to live music since the girl was 4 years old, and she intended to keep doing so until she could not. That was not up for negotiation. Rosie still had the drawing of the 6-legged horse. She had taped it to the wall above her desk. She told 2 people at school about the man with a gray beard who had sat with her and told her about the horse, and one of them believed her, and one of them did not. And she did not mind either way, because she knew what had happened. Walt Rourke drove back to Chillicothe the following morning, later than he had planned, and he did not mind. He had sat in the diner on 5th Street with his son until midnight, the first time they had sat anywhere together in 3 years, and they had talked about some things and not talked about others, which is how it goes when 2 people begin the process of finding their way back to each other. It does not happen all at once. It happens in diners at midnight, and in phone calls on Tuesday mornings, and in drives to Columbus on cold Saturdays in November when you said you would be there and you are there. He pulled onto the highway with the city going small in his mirrors and the road opening up ahead and somewhere behind him, on a stage on 4th and Vine. His son was packing up a guitar that he had been playing since he was 9 years old. That was enough. That was more than enough. There is a man at the back of every line who nobody looks at twice, not because he is invisible, because the person doing the looking has already decided what they see and has stopped looking, and sometimes that decision costs them nothing, and sometimes it costs them the room. Marcus Webb learned what he was looking at. He learned it from a wrist and a patch and a man who did not need him to know and would have gone inside either way. He learned it the way most lessons arrive, too fast and in front of people and without any chance to prepare. But the lesson Marcus Webb will carry longer than that one. The one that he turned over on the drive home that night and that he will turn over again at odd moments for the rest of his life is not the wrist. It is the northwest corner. It is the gray-bearded man who sat on a cold floor with a scared little girl for an hour and 49 minutes and missed the first half of his son's set and told her the six-legged horse was going to win every race. He did not have to do that. Nobody made him. That's the part that stays. If this story reached you, if you believe that the most important thing a person does in any room is the thing nobody asked them to do, like this, and share it with someone who needs to remember that goodness is still out there. Subscribe so you never miss the next one. And drop a comment below. Have you ever had a stranger sit with you when you were scared? Tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one.